Welcome to the WEInvested podcast, where we teach you how to save and make more cash. Okay, so today on the WEInvested podcast, we have with us Lance Graulich, and he is the founder and CEO of Ion Franchising. And this is an industry-leading franchise consultant and development group that represents over 500 franchise brands and business opportunities within 90 categories. Lance, how are you doing today?
Wesley, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks. I'm super pumped to be here.
Yes, sir, for sure. And so we'll just jump right into it. So, what is Ion Franchising and how did you get started?
Ion Franchising, well, as you said, industry leading consulting group. We take independent businesses and set them up to franchise. But the fun part of my business is taking anybody that is looking to better themselves, become an entrepreneur, find their perfect franchise. That's my favorite part. So we take people that are corporate refugees or just everyday folks that are just tired of the W-2 grind and want to explore. And I'm sure we'll get into it later, but everybody thinks there's so many people that think that you got to be a millionaire to own a franchise like McDonald's. And the reality is, I have tons of franchises under 150,000 bucks, and all you need is 25% down payment. And yes, I have franchise finance loans available, so anybody can do it if you want to do it.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you offer like the full service, the total package for your clients.
Absolutely 100%. I had so many phone calls yesterday, and almost every single phone call, I'm following up with email introductions to franchise finance companies. Just like buying a house, it's always much better that you get pre qualified because I don't want to disappoint you in showing you brands that, for whatever reason, you might not qualify for.
For sure, for sure. And so, just to kind of backtrack a little bit for the people who may not be too familiar with a franchise and what exactly that means, could you just kind of elaborate more on what exactly a franchise is?
Yeah, look, there are plenty of entrepreneurs that decide one day, like Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, that when they're in college, they have an idea and they have a burning desire to get that idea out. And certainly it's much better when you're in college. You have nothing to lose. You don't have to worry about risk. What's the big deal? But most people don't have that one concept that's burning within them to sort of give birth to a business. So franchising is kind of like that cheat, that hack, that starter, if you will, because somebody else has spent all the time and energy creating a brand, creating a support system. It's proven to some degree. They have to establish a trademark. And basically, you're licensing this name, this trademark, and this way of doing business and this system. And in exchange for that, you are going to, well, obviously have a right to use the name, the system, and you'll be trained by them. You'll be supported by them. You'll take marketing advice. You'll participate in a marketing fund. And basically you're going to operate within that brand. But, you're not the one really up in the middle of the night worrying about, what's our next revenue stream? How do we counteract, let's say, a pandemic? The brand has a team that worries about those things. But look, as a team, as a franchisee, you get to work off of each other as well. But which is an amazing dynamic because everybody's got a vested interest in this brand's success. So there's an old expression in franchising. You're you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself.
For sure. That's a great quote. And, when I was in college, I just probably graduated 3 or 4 years ago. But when I was in college, I used to work for a Subway. And I always just kind of had an idea of like, oh man, this would be great to franchise and maybe own my own Subway one day. So that's kind of a thought that's all. Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
That's
And
kind of a,
one part of the question I didn't quite answer, as far as franchising goes, there's two major fees involved. One is an ongoing fee. When you become a franchisee, the way the franchise brand, you mentioned Subway, the way Subway makes money is by charging a royalty. And the royalty is something that is basically, it's not based on profitability, it's based on your sales, your gross sales minus your tax, and you're paying a percentage. Restaurants, It's anywhere from 5% to 8% of sales, depending on the brand. And, the brands have calculated this royalty to understand that, you have to have a fair amount of profitability. If you're going to ask for a larger royalty, it's because there's probably a lot more profitability there in this brand. The other fee is the franchise fee. And the franchise fee is what's paid up front. The franchise fee could be $25,000 to $75,000. And it's typically a one-time fee. And that fee is essentially the keys to the kingdom. Some brands spend millions of dollars in proprietary brand equities and trademarks and systems and technology and what have you. And that's your fee to enter. And if you're getting into a restaurant franchise, for example, and Subway's going to have to send people to help you train staff and open the store, and the franchise fee is what that it takes into consideration all of that. So you're not coming out of pocket for any additional monies to start. So that's the story. Quick story.
For sure. And so you kind of touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of dive deeper into it. So what is the average cost of a franchise today?
The average cost today, it's probably around $175,000. There's 6,000 plus franchise brands out there. But there's quite a few that are under 150,000 with, certainly a proven results and a way that I can show you how to validate the success that people are having, which means that the right prospective franchisee fitting into a new franchise system, Wesley, like yourself, I could kind of gauge and tell you, I think you're going to be really successful at this brand or that brand. So there's a whole process I put people through as to how I match them up to find the perfect franchise for them.
For sure, for sure. So, what would you say are some of the most popular franchise categories today?
Well, the most popular seems to always be restaurants. I think restaurants, they're visible. So people get a comfort level. They see a McDonald's on every corner in America, or a Wendy's, or a Five Guys, or whatever it might be. And those are all franchises. So restaurants are absolutely incredibly popular. The other sector that is, or the category that is huge, is the personal care. Personal care, things like massage, things like, waxing, and, you're getting your eyelashes done, or eyebrow threading, salons, of course. I have quite a few salon suites brands, which is more or less like a real estate play where you have a big, salon suite and you're now renting out space to people. There's quite a few franchises like that. But, the Great Clips of the world, and Sport Clips, and Supercuts, and, the salons do quite well. And, when you get into ROI, you're a finance guy, you appreciate the investment side of things. People always ask me, well, what's the best ROI? I said, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some of the lower cost franchises are the best ROI, because it might only cost you, like, I have a brand that costs you $60,000 to get into it, 62 to be exact. There are people that can net $200,000 to $500,000 out of their house. There's even people that can do $1 million in revenue essentially out of their house. Although most of those franchisees have already scaled by adding some staff. They don't want to work as hard. Once you cross a certain threshold, you hire some people. But a brand like I was mentioning, $62,000, you're going to get your money back typically with that brand within the first 8 months or less.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. And usually, like, if you're starting a business on your own without franchising, they tell you to expect to basically make no money for the first 2 to 5 years. So,
Absolutely. And, look, it's the old days. I mean, you're a young guy. I'm 54 now, but the old days, you used to get in a car and you were going somewhere, and you didn't have Google Maps, or, I have an Android, but, Google Maps today, it's going to give you your best path. That's what a business plan is. And that's what a franchise is. Somebody else has built this plan for you, essentially in Google Maps, to show you the best path to success. And there are some people that just don't follow that path well. They want to do their own thing. And franchising is simply about not reinventing the wheel, but just following what those before you have laid out.
For sure. And I think that's a great segue into our next question. So, how do you know that owning a franchise is for you?
Yeah, and that is a phenomenal question. It's if somebody is willing to follow someone else's plan, because this is something that's been tested. And here's the thing in franchising. I became a Wingstop franchisee in the earlier days of Wingstop when friends of mine said to me, what are you doing? Just chicken wings? I don't even understand. What people just eat chicken wings? And I was like, of course they do. It's like the most popular appetizer on restaurant menus. Why wouldn't it be a good concept? But some people didn't believe. So those people that don't believe, I mean, there are people that are risk takers. And for example, at Wingstop, there was a guy that was the first franchisee of Wingstop. Imagine it at 150 stores open, people were telling me I'm crazy. What about the guy that went in as the number one first franchisee when there wasn't really that map yet, so to speak? So are you a risk taker? What level of risk are you looking to take on? What is your investment level? What is your background? Because franchising is really just about a smart person that is willing to listen, a team player, because you're going to get coaching from existing franchisees. And, I was president of the Franchise Advisory Council for Wingstop. So I have a lot of new franchisees call me on a regular basis. And I love coaching and mentoring people and helping, because I know if I help make those franchisees successful, quicker, it's better for the entire brand. So I do have a free assessment. So to answer your question, I do have a free assessment on my website. And that's a huge help because it's quite scientific. And what it does in 10 or 15 minutes is it helps me understand somebody's mindset, somebody's skill set, and what they're willing to take on. And it's interesting, for example, do they have any kind of sales ability? The brand I mentioned a little earlier, that's 62,000 home base, you got to have some sales ability. You have to have a comfort level to have a conversation with someone like we are right now. There are some people that can't come on podcasts. They're a little shy, right?
For sure.
Well, those aren't the people that you want selling anything then. So, so I take the scientific assessment. I take a whole litany of questions I ask based on investment level, based on lifestyle. There are some people that tell me, hey, I want to work 9 to 5 and have off weekends. Well, that's fantastic. I got franchises like that. But at some point, I'll show certain people franchises and they just don't like anything. And that's okay. That just means they're not really ready. And I tell people, stay at your job or wait for new franchises or new industries or new categories to be born. Think about where we are today. What was 11, 12 years ago, Google came about. Technology has revolutionized franchising because a lot of franchise brands invested a fortune in search engine optimization and Google ads and Facebook ads and all kinds of different things to make sure that they're noticed. In the old days, probably before you were born, it was the yellow pages. Remember the yellow pages?
Yes, sir.
Place an ad and hope somebody calls you.
Exactly.
So
Yes, sir.
that's the quick and dirty on that.
Nice. And I think this is like a really great topic. And it was something I was personally excited about because franchising is something that, you kind of always hear about, but you don't really understand the how to get involved with it and the background of it and what it takes to do it and what exactly franchising is. So I'm very, very excited for this episode. But so how do you know when your independent business is ready to franchise?
It's a great question. So the first sort of litmus test, I spoke to a young lady not too long ago in Atlanta that had a great salon concept. And when she called me, because she knew another brand that I set up, the now famous cheesesteak brand in Atlanta, which we could talk about, set them up for franchising. So she called me and said, hey, so-and-so told me that you'll set me up for franchising. I would like to hear more about it. And I said, well, tell me about your business. And she was amazing because at the end of the day, Wesley, people that are looking for a franchise, when you're in the final stages, It's really all about the leadership. Because when you give your money to a franchise, a big franchise like Subway, for example, Fred DeLuca created Subway. Great guy. I know people that knew him, but he passed away. So who is the leader of Subway? Who's the leadership? Who's the executive team? So even in big franchises, you'll get to know the executive team, maybe not necessarily the ownership team. But in the smaller brands, you get to know where the rubber meets the road, you get to know that owner. And in this case, this young lady was just phenomenal. She was articulate. She was smart. She was, getting her hands dirty, in the business. She knew everything about it. This was her baby. And she had 2 successful corporate locations, not just one, but 2. Now, in the franchise world, in her case, the only negative would be she doesn't exactly have the proof of concept. She has the proof of concept on a local level, but she's in Atlanta. So if I go to Chicago, does she have proof of concept? I don't know. Maybe, probably. So, brands that, like, I have an IV brand, IV infusion brand. People love these brands these days because of, wellness and keeping your immunity boosted and what have you. Well, that brand is in like 6 small cities and 2 major cities, being Dallas and Phoenix. So that's got a lot more proof of concept in that so many different cities. Because one of the things that a lot of prospective franchisees, my candidates will ask me, Wesley, they'll go, well, Lance, will that really work in my area? Well, at the end of the day, what's the dynamic to that question? The dynamic's all about demographics. So if you have a clientele that has a household income of $75,000 and they're a certain age group, well, that demographic of those 2 key points I mentioned is all over the country. And there's plenty of software to figure out where that demographic is if that is your clientele. So anyway, back to my young lady in Atlanta. She was amazing. She was phenomenal. So any prospective franchisee, when they speak to her, they're going to love her. And I asked her, I said, what is your secret sauce? Why are you different than other salon concepts? And she told me, she figured out a way to have a less expensive build out. So what does that mean? In your world, that resonates with you, Wesley. Lower investment, upfront investment, and a quicker return on your investment. So that was music to my ears. And then she had some other things, proprietary products, and she had an amazing social media following. So that's awesome. Nice traction with marketing. So anyway, she's set up for franchising now, and it'll be a big success story coming soon. So what is your secret sauce, essentially? What is that proprietary piece of your business? I have a brand. You ready for this one? It's called Smash My Trash.
Nice.
There's nothing like it. Patent pending business. They figured out a way, because in the commercial waste management world, if you're a restaurant or any kind of business that has a dumpster that you pay for, those dumpsters fill up quickly. And Smash My Trash does exactly what you think. They have a special machine. They pull up to your dumpster. They smash it down so you have more room in your dumpster. Saves you about 70% in trash pickup. Genius idea. Highly profitable franchise, incredible opportunity, and they're selling out everywhere across the country. It's about a $350,000 investment, but you can make a substantial amount. You can make a lot more than that in 1 year.
And that's awesome. That's awesome. And this is a word that I hear often in the business world, proof of concept. So, could you kind of elaborate more on the importance of proof of concept and what exactly that means?
Yeah. And it sort of goes back to what I was saying about Wingstop. When I joined Wingstop and there was already 150 locations, that was enough proof of concept for me. But so, for example, and we can get into the legalities of it, every franchise brand is required to produce a franchise disclosure document, FDD for short. In addition to that is a franchise agreement. But the FDD is the disclosure document in which there's 23 points. Item 19 is the financial representations or the earnings claim. Wingstop's earnings claim back in 2003 or so, or four, when I became a franchisee, was nothing major. It was about 600,000 per location. They didn't claim any sort of margins. They didn't claim anything about net profit or anything. So there's a validation stage that everybody would go through where you get to talk to franchisees. And as I talk to franchisees, I could say, hey, Wesley, so how do you like being a franchisee? How much money do you make? How long did it take you to make any money? Tell me about staffing. How hard is it to find people? How hard is it to train people, et cetera, et cetera? So, you start to figure these things out. Now, the proof of concept on a 150 restaurant chain versus a 15 restaurant chain is obviously quite different. And then yet again, I have people that want something that is super proven, and they want something with 700 or more locations. And I'm like, well, look, at some point when brands grow up big, there's none left, like McDonald's. You're not going to get a McDonald's today. You might get a resale on a McDonald's, third generation of a family is tired and just wants to sell, cash out, reinvest in something else. So proof of concept, again, it goes back to beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some people fall in love with the concept right away, like the first franchisee of Wingstop that saw it, got it, and now has 35, 40 locations right now, whatever he's got these days. I've lost touch with him. But, so it's just up to you and what your vision is. Leaders have vision and entrepreneurs have vision. And some people see things that others will never see.
For sure. And so, hearing these high barrier of entry, it seems like high barrier of entry to kind of get started in the franchise game.
In the restaurant business, for sure, because it's to open a Wingstop, it's $400,000.
For sure. So, what would you say, is some of the best ways to finance a franchise?
Yeah. So financing is not very difficult. It's a cumbersome process. So if anybody out there owns a home, or it's not an easy process. It's a pain in the neck. They're asking you for every piece of paper since birth, practically, it seems. And franchise finance is not that dissimilar. But typically, all you need is a 680 credit score, which is not outstanding credit by any means, but 680 credit score. You need to put 25% as your down payment on whatever it is. So considering an average franchise, let's say $200,000, and you put down $50,000. A lot of people can save $50,000. Could take you 10 years, could take you 30 years. But, some people borrow some of the money, get some gift money from somebody, get investors, friends, family. So, but 25% is what you'd put down. They want you to have some capitalization after that. It can't be your last $50,000, your first and last. There are quite a few people now that take money if they had a corporate job and had a 401k. I spoke to a young lady the other day. She only had $20,000 cash, but she had $110,000 in her 401k. And she did want to do just a home-based business. And quite a few of the businesses that she's looking at could be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for her, and that's it. So you can take money out of a 401k. Basically, it's called a ROBS, ROBS, which is a rollover business startup loan, and you're borrowing from yourself with no penalties. Basically, they'll set you up a C corporation, and the money goes in there, and you can invest in real estate, you can invest in a franchise, invest in anything that's for you. So those are a couple of the highlights on how you would, some of the best financing options out there. But the Small Business Administration really wants to stimulate the economy always, and franchising is one of the best ways. Now, if there's a brand that got in trouble and maybe isn't performing as well, at some point the SBA will no longer lend for that brand. Maybe they've had too many defaults from franchisees. And at the end of the day with franchising, Wesley, as you can imagine, just like in a job, there's always unhappy employees. Well, there's always unhappy franchisees. Maybe somebody, like I guarantee you today, there's plenty of unhappy Subway franchisees. There's unhappy McDonald's franchisees. It's just the nature of the beast. Whoever's driving the bus, so to speak, is going too fast, not going fast enough. It's a bumpy ride. Subway years ago, they were talking about doing pizza. Some franchisees wanted it. Some franchisees didn't want it. It's always something. This is why it's important, just like in business, you can never control what your boss says all the time or does all the time. You kind of take the good and the bad. Well, joining a franchise, there's a lot of wonderful things, but look, the brand is going to be controlled by somebody else. So you got to, like a marriage, you get involved in the right opportunity for yourself.
For sure. And that's a great segue to my next question. So, what would you say that a potential franchisee risk tolerance has to be, in order to become a franchisee?
Yeah, there's quite a few franchises that I don't. Now I'm a little different, and that's a whole other conversation. How do people become entrepreneurs in the first place? Are they born that way? Is there something in their environment that triggers them to want to be an entrepreneur? Well, I was a born entrepreneur. Both my grandfathers were very successful. One of them barely even spoke English, and I couldn't understand most of what he said. As I was growing up, and he was very, very successful in the supermarket business. He created his own brand. But I can tell you that if people are worried about risk, in other words, they have a really large comfort zone and don't want to step out of that comfort zone unless it's something that they feel they're going to be really successful at, I have brands for them. I have brands where either in the franchise disclosure document, that will give them a comfort level based on the success of their franchisees, or by the time they talk to franchisees in the business, they will understand that they sound just like them. Like, hey, this sounds like me. That's me now. What they're describing that they went through, and look how successful they are. I can do it just like they can. And some people just don't ever see it, and that's okay. They're just not ready yet. There are people that truly aren't ready. It's like anything. There are people who aren't ready to be married. There are people that are not ready to have kids. But
right,
being a father sometimes just happens when you least expect it.
For sure.
Business ownership should be planned just as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, what are the actionable steps that a potential franchisee can take to becoming that owner?
Yeah. Well, the first step always is give me a call. What any great, I'm sure a ton of your listeners, if not all of them, because they're all interested in some sort of investing in themselves, of course. And every one of them has probably heard Tony Robbins to Dean Graziosi to Gary Vee. Everybody will tell you the same exact thing about making yourself better. Resource up. And resource up is all about finding someone that knows more about a subject than you. And I'm a free resource when it comes to franchising. I've owned Wingstop restaurants in multiple cities and as well as Krispy Kreme donuts in different states. And I know you're from North Carolina, so we all know about that hot light. I could tell you the secrets later on that. But, and I also created a now famous donut brand on my own called Pink Box that started in Vegas in 2011. Now it's continuing to expand like crazy. So, I get bored. I'm that guy that gets bored though. As an entrepreneur, it needs to be fresh for me all the time. I don't know if it's ADD or what. I certainly am plenty obsessive compulsive, but the bottom line for all your listeners is resource up. You can reach out to me, do the free assessment on my site. We'll have a conversation. It's all about investment level, lifestyle. I have guys, Wesley, guys and gals that call me that say, well, I want to keep my day job, or at least for a little bit. No problem. I have quite a few brands that you can do as an absentee owner, as an investor type. But then there's other brands like Fast Signs is pretty famous sign and graphic design shop. Fast Signs, you have to be the owner operator. Great Clips hair salons, you have to be the owner operator. Great Clips, you don't have to know how to cut hair, but you're following the system to ensure that the standards are upheld. That's what franchising is all about. And then at some point you become a multi-unit operator, let's say with Great Clips. They don't care that you're there every single day anymore. You're now a multi-unit operator. So I do have a franchise brand for absolutely everybody. I probably have quite a few brands for everybody, but it all starts with a phone call so we can explore. People that have never explored before, like a lot of things, they might not pull the trigger, and that's okay. Sometimes I talk to people for 5 years plus, and then all of a sudden they're ready. I had a guy reach out to me recently that I've been talking to for probably 3 years. He said, "Hey, Happy New Year! I saw your New Year message. I would love to talk again and see if we can get me a franchise in 2021." And but that's okay. I mean, look, I'm happy to talk to anybody. I get a commission paid by my brands. I call it a success fee when I do match somebody up and they do actually buy a franchise. But other than that, it's all free.
And that's awesome. That's awesome. And just kind of taking a step back, you mentioned your grandfathers, and even before we started recording, we were talking about how you were originally from Brooklyn and grew up in Long Island and then migrated out to Arizona and then Vegas, I believe. So, did you always have that entrepreneurial spirit, or is this something that kind of developed over time?
At a young age, I looked at Dad. Dad was an accountant that eventually followed his older brother into Wall Street in New York, and I thought I was going to do the same thing, go to Wall Street, and I worked throughout the summers for Dad's company and throughout college in the summertime. And then once I was out of college and had my economics degree, I found it uninspiring and boring. Now, there are a lot of people that would kill for that job because not everybody, there's not enough of those jobs. And it's an enormous opportunity to make a lot of money. So if I had to do it over again, I probably would have stayed there for at least 10 years and banked a lot of money. Because Wesley, a lot of my mistakes were because I didn't have all of my own money. I had some money that I saved, of course, but I didn't have all of it. So when you get into restaurants, it's very capital intense. And when you don't have all your own money and you bring in partners, well, just like my first marriage that failed, I had partnerships that failed. I ran great restaurants and great franchises and won awards and what have you, but it's got to be based on a solid foundation. And my foundation was bad. I invited people into my partnerships that should not have been there. But Wall Street was interesting. I was good at it, but I didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't exciting being in that environment. I like the people aspects of things. So when I got in the restaurant business, I realized my combination of people skills and number skills, finance together was a good combination for the restaurant business. And I got a call from a good family friend who made his money in tech before anybody did. When analog phones went digital, he made a lot of money with a big company. And he lived on Mummy Mountain in Scottsdale, Arizona, in a huge house. And he said, let's go build a TGI Fridays franchise. And he called me after he signed the deal for 4 TGI Fridays. This is in 1989. See how old I am? And I probably still have shoes from 1989. And anyway, I helped him build that TGI Fridays franchise from 4 locations to about 65, doing 225 million in sales a year. Now, I wasn't the sole guy. I ended up being a regional manager, but he essentially gave me the education, listening to how he negotiated leases for these restaurants and hired new folks. But the guy that really ran this whole thing is still a good friend of mine today, very good friend of mine. And in fact, he refers most of my consulting deals to me with big companies. I'm actually now working on bringing a bakery concept from the UK that has quite a few locations, setting them up for franchising in the US. So pretty excited.
Man, that's awesome. And so, like, when you were first getting started, with that TGI Fridays, was it intimidating? Was it exciting? Like, how was that experience? How was that process for you personally?
Oh, well, I did work in bars and restaurants throughout college. You're right. And nobody's ever asked that question. When I hit TGI Fridays, being a newbie, really, because Fridays was the first franchise that I experienced, and it had an amazing training program. They told you when you went through management training program, you'll know more than 99% of restaurant operators in the world, because that's how good Fridays training was. And Fridays was incredible back in those days. So it was intimidating in the beginning. And that family friend, when I started with them, so I left that Wall Street job, and I ended up as a host at a TGI Fridays in Mesa, Arizona. Can you even imagine? I left a job where I could have been making $400,000 a year soon enough back in '89, and I'm getting paid $9 an hour as a host. And the only reason I got $9 an hour is they hoped I'd be a manager someday. And then I got fast tracked in the manager. They called it the Manager in Development Program. So to the long answer to your question, heck yeah, it was intimidating, because there were line cooks that had been with TGI Fridays for 12 years already that took their job very seriously, that made more money than me. But boy, do they know that job well. They were
For,
technicians.
for sure. And talk about like two different ends of the spectrum, like going from Wall Street to TGI Fridays. I know they had to be like crazy
Wall
to kind of
Street to Main
process.
Street.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And a little earlier, I heard you, mention Gary V, and you kind of talked about your New Year email that you send out to your list. So it seems like you're very resourceful and very active on social media and email marketing. So what role does that play for you today?
Yeah, I never really did put myself out there. It was only about 7 months ago I started becoming what I call now a professional guest, at least I hope so, on podcasts. And with that came social media. And I think I'll do a lot more of that in 2021. I love when people reach out to me after they see me on a podcast, and a lot of people are filling out that free assessment on my website, and they get a nice report, as well. And social media people contact me all the time. So yeah, look, in this world, it's always a constant. You always have to constantly remind people that you're there, which is why everybody talks about content, content, content. You know, yeah, I would like to be the biggest guy out there in franchising. I know within my circle, I can be. I'm a resource to a lot of people, a lot of my friends in the industry, especially because I've owned quite a few franchises. So no, but it's a lot of fun. Look, you got to like people. You got to like connecting with people, and that is certainly my favorite thing.
For sure. And just kind of speaking on people and connecting with people, what's the importance of having a good team, and how did you build your team?
Yeah, you know, over the years in the restaurant business, one of my first books that I'm going to be writing, Wesley, is going to be on hiring for the restaurant and franchise business, so the hospitality business, because it seems like a lot of people don't know how to build a team. And I always describe it as you have to find a solid core. It's all about that core. You'll always have turnover, but you need a solid core. And the core is really defined as the structure or the foundation for the team. So once you have a couple of solid lieutenants, um, they start to, you don't know who those lieutenants necessarily are. You hope you know who they are, but most people get in trouble because they hire the wrong people in the first place. And especially in the hospitality business, I would do multiple interviews, even if it's for a cook's position or a host or hostess position, doesn't matter. Do 3 interviews. Do they show up on time in all 3 interviews? Do they look good in all 3 interviews? Do they look haggard in 2 of the 3 interviews, like they, just woke up and they smell like cigarette smoke or alcohol or who knows what, depending on what you need them to smell like. I mean, if it's a phone job, it doesn't matter what they smell like, right? So, and then fast forward to where I am today, it's really building your network. I mean, I have connections all over the place. I had a gentleman call me who's a friend of mine in franchise marketing, and he said, "Hey, I know a guy that really wants to start his own concept. He's ready to do it, but he can't get financing. I know you have contacts everywhere, but I know he's gotten rejected by all these lenders." So I said, "Give me his number." So I call him and I said, "I got a guy for you." And sure enough, it worked. He got an $800,000 loan from my guy after he got rejected by multiple banks. That's all about who you know and connections. And I got a nice big thank you from the lender, of course, because people like to take care of me because I deliver them business, and that's, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's all about affiliate marketing, right?
Exactly.
So I have all those contacts developed. I continue to develop contacts. If I could benefit somebody or they could benefit me, it doesn't always have to be a two-way street. I like working with great people. If somebody's a great person, especially a younger person that's starting out doing something, and they can't really help me, or I don't know if they can help me, I don't really care. I rather help them because at some point, hopefully, they can help me. And if
For
they
sure.
can't, it's okay. I've helped them, and I feel good about it.
For sure. And that's like, I've interviewed quite a few entrepreneurs, and that's like one of the main things that they say is that they have trouble with the hiring process. So, I feel like a book or, some content that you plan to put out based on hiring would be well received, because that's like a major problem and a major issue, for a lot of new entrepreneurs and, just anyone
Yeah.
really just trying to hire the right people.
Yeah, and Wesley, it's a good point. Most people just don't know what they're really hiring for. They haven't really thought out that job description, and within that, basically, you're just asking questions that coincide with that job description. And then there's an old saying that people tend to be their best at an interview. In other words, they're not going to get any better than the interview. Are they conning you into answering all the questions the right way, but don't really mean it? And that's why it's really important how you ask the questions. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in the restaurant business, I did a multitude of interviews for every position. As I was mentioning earlier, at least 3 interviews. Well, you know what the third interview was in the restaurant business? It was a panel interview. Like, I had staff that would interview them. Now, I didn't tell the person this. So a lot of times I would stage things. Like, there was a time in one of my restaurants I was really busy, and the person walked in the middle of lunch on purpose. So he can see how busy the restaurant is, and what his temperament was, and whether he can handle this stress. And I sat him at our counter and said, I'll be back, but I'm a little busy right now. I'll be back. And I sent over staff one at a time, a couple of my core key staff who knew in advance that this guy was going to be coming. And they each asked him a question. They sat down with him for a second, shook his hand, and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so. Nice to meet you. So I heard you meeting Lance today. So why do you want to work here? What do you do? That type of thing, kind of a quick question or two." And they were sizing him up, and he didn't know that this was part of the process. This was the process. And at the end of that, I went up to him. I said, "Thanks, I'll give you a call." And he goes, "Well, aren't we going to talk?" And I said, "We already did." He goes, "Shocking, right?"
That's
Because at the end of
genius.
the day, you want to test people and see how they're going to be. And this is the staff. This is the key staff that you're going to be working with. And what that does is the core staff really, of course, feels comfortable with me because I'm allowing them to be part of this process and decide who's going to be who's going to work for us or not. And thereby, I ended up really establishing a waiting list of people to work for me at many different restaurant concepts, because I became what's called an employer of choice. People knew that it was a great place to work, and the employees then really started recruiting and digging deep. Because how do you find the best employee in the hospitality business? Like, if I go to a Starbucks and I have amazing service, I'll hand them my business card and say, "Hey, Wesley, you were fantastic. If you got any friends or family that are just like you, tell them to call me because I'm interested." And you know what would end up happening? That person a lot of times would call me. And either they are going to refer somebody to me or say, "You know what? I don't quite work full time over there and I really need more hours. You got anything part time? Because everybody wants to work with someone that's a nice person, right? It all starts with that. Everybody sees the Be Kind campaign, right? Be kind. World would be a better place if everybody was just kind.
For sure. Yes, sir. And so, it seems like you're in a space right now where you're creating a lot, working on, bringing companies over from the UK to the US and working on new books and just like in a really creative space right now. But what would you say is your favorite part of being an entrepreneur?
My favorite part is just like yesterday. I had a conversation with a young lady that heard me on a podcast that is not happy with her job. She's super nice, super smart, and just wants to better herself. And she doesn't have forget about financial freedom. She doesn't have the freedom of time right now. She can't set her own schedule. There's other things she'd like to do. She's got nieces and nephews she wants to hang out with, but all she is a slave to her job. And she knows, based on hearing me speak on podcasts, that there's better opportunities for her, and she's looking forward to exploring. So she's going to be set up with, financing. She'll have a meeting, I think, next Tuesday with one or two, and then a follow-up with me so I can present brands that will suit her. And whether it's her time now or her time is in a few years from now, my favorite part is truly finding people their freedom to do what they want. Because at the end of the day, it's not the amount of money you make, it's the lifestyle and freedom. Because the one limiting factor we all have in this lifetime is time. And it's not about the money, it's about getting back your time so you get to do exactly what you want. You don't have to be a billionaire to do everything you want to do. I've had the fancy cars. I'll never forget when my dad first got his first Mercedes. He was so excited. Got his first fancy big old sedan, and he had it for a year, and he goes, "I'm good." I go, "What do you mean you're good?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm done with I don't need this. And I had it. It's nothing special. Steering wheel and four wheels, and I'm done." It's like Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett doesn't have a Bentley or any fancy cars. I mean, if you want fancy cars, go right ahead. Make enough money, you can have all those fancy cars. But he just, last I checked, drives a Cadillac, lives in the same house in Omaha, Nebraska. Last I checked, and so look, anybody can do whatever they want to do. Write it down. It's always better when you have a visual, right? Set those goals. And if it's owning your own business, look me up. I'll hook you up.
For sure. For sure. So, what would you say is the single most important reason for your success?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that one. I grew up, because of the entrepreneurial family I grew up with, I grew up with a big advantage because as a kid, I was very inquisitive. So I asked a lot of questions. I had one grandfather that was a big real estate attorney, owned buildings. And I had the other grandfather that was in the grocery business that owned a chain of supermarkets, that drove a big fat Cadillac and smoked a big stogie, when Cadillacs in those days were like the Bentley. And I asked a lot of questions. And my dad realized probably when I started at 14 getting jobs, when nobody told me to get a job, I did it on my own. Working off commission, selling sweatshirts, Russell athletic wear at a flea market, as they called it in the old days. And I realized I was motivated by success, and success did not have to equate billions. If it happens, great. Mark Zuckerberg didn't set out to be a billionaire. He had a great idea. He created Facebook. And oh, by the way, he happened to make money. So there are plenty of people that run nonprofits that are successful and doing an amazing thing, and they feel fantastic and they have success. So for me, I love people and I love helping people. And I learned at a young age that that was very important to me. And as I made mistakes in franchising, although I was very successful, I wanted to make sure that I was able to put myself in a position to teach people, not only from books that I'm going to write in the future, but now how to make sure that they can live their best life being their own boss and not making the mistakes that I made.
For sure. Yes, sir. So, you've been in business, it seems like since 1989, and even before that, working on Wall Street and seeing your grandparents growing up. So, can you recall a specific fight or flight moment in your business journey, like a very critical moment that you knew, this is a big moment and I'll either go one way or the other?
Well, that was the Wall Street deal, the conversation I had with my dad that said, Dad, I can't do this anymore. And it was hard. And not only was I going to leave the career working for his company. I mean, he was a senior vice president. He was a partner. They were the largest over-the-counter trading house on Wall Street. And I was going to leave his company. And not only that, I was going to go across country because I just wanted something else. And that was a tough moment. And as I mentioned earlier, that's probably the only regret. If I had a chance to stay there 10 years longer and bank all the cash, I probably should have, because most people don't get that opportunity. It doesn't matter what your resume is. There's not enough jobs out there. That's why the old saying is, it's who you know. And there's a lot of people qualified for a lot of jobs. And, there's a little luck. If you work hard enough, that luck ends up materializing, it seems.
For sure. So, who do you look up to for inspiration and why?
Well, it was definitely always my dad, my grandparents. But today, very specifically, dad passed away unfortunately earlier this year. But who I look up to these days, that's a great question. Again, Wesley, you hit me with these questions that it seems like an obvious question too. I look, as I mentioned earlier in one of the stories with Mark Zuckerberg, it's not that difficult to set up a business when you have nothing to lose. Because if you screw it up, you're still staying in your parents' house, right? For the most part, especially when you're young. It's the entrepreneurs like, if you know the KFC story with Colonel Sanders, he started KFC when he was in his 70s. I think it was early 70s. That's motivating and inspiring. I have a bookcase opposite me right now in this room that I'm at with every book from Howard Schultz and how he created Starbucks to Arthur Rosenberg and how he created Dunkin' Donuts, and obviously Jeff Bezos and with Amazon, and Tony Hsieh with Zappos, which is based in Vegas, and I've toured that facility. It's the older guys that strike it rich and hit their gold late in life. That's pretty incredible, because in a lot of cases you have a lot more to lose as you get older. So, but there's a lot of inspiration for me. I just love looking at entrepreneurs that do things over and over again. I have a friend, Scott, that's worth probably about $600 million, $600 million. I don't know what the current number is. He's more impressive than anybody because he's had, I think, 6 exits from 6 different companies. This is a guy that can do it over and over again. And it's not 600 million, 600 trillion. It doesn't make a difference. Some of those zeros are just a little luck because of timing. There's plenty of great people that, look at the guy right before Zuckerberg that did MySpace. Pretty genius guy. I'm sure he made some money somewhere. But then the guy that invested in Apple early was Steve Jobs. Do you remember this story? One of the original investors in Apple sold out very early. Very early. So what's the difference between him staying in and him selling out? $100 billion, right? So does that make him dumb? No, there's opportunities everywhere. And it's not about going to Harvard and being successful. It's about actually doing the work. Wesley, you know that. It's all about doing work. And there's a lot of people I know that are going to be W-2 employees for the rest of their lives. And that's it. And that's okay if that's okay with them. What I hate is people that constantly think that they should be doing something better and never take the first step. It only hurts them, because life is short. So if you want to do it, just do it. Go for it. Start with calling me. You might end up starting your own business after talking to me, and that's okay. At least I helped.
Yes, sir, for sure. So, what does the future of Ion franchising look like?
Future's amazing. And, this year I've taken on quite a few more brands. I truly represent more franchise brands today than anybody in the US. And I'm just growing through my network. So this will be a banner year for us. Probably start my own podcast in the next couple of months too, as well. So, yeah, it's going to be a good year. It's going to be a good year. There's, franchising. There's always opportunities in franchising. There's always new brands coming up, but I love it. I have quite a few contracts helping emerging brands become a household name, and no matter what, I'll keep doing that because, as I mentioned earlier, I love keeping it fresh and keeping it new, and there's just so many people that need help out there, and I'm happy to do it.
For sure. Yes, sir. Well, it's been great talking with you. But
Likewise.
before we, yes, sir. But before we end every podcast, we like to play a rapid fire question game at
Uh-oh.
the end. Yes,
Uh-oh.
sir. With three questions. So if you're interested in playing, I'll go ahead and get started.
Let me take some more tequila. That's water. I'm just kidding. Do it. Let's go for
Yes,
it.
sir. All right. So question number one: where's your favorite place to travel?
Oh, that's easy. Mexico. Cancun. The Ritz-Carlton in Cancun is not an expensive Ritz-Carlton. It is gorgeous, and that's margaritas, chips and salsa, and my wife, my new perfect wife, last 10 years. We're still honeymooning.
Yes, sir. All right. Question number two: what song explains your life the most?
Well, life to me is absolutely a journey. So Journey is my all-time favorite band. It's all about not don't stop believing, okay? Don't stop believing.
Yeah,
And those lyrics are everything.
for sure. And look, final question: what's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
That no one was, I am a caretaker type personality and a protector. And as my dad was as well. And you know what I do? I'll never forget when my kids were young. And it's the same thing with my wife now. My wife will go to sleep early and she'll get hot, before I get in bed, and she'll throw the covers off. So what I'll do when nobody's looking is I'll cover her up, make sure she's safe, make sure she's warm. Did the same thing for the kids. And I remember catching myself. That's a great question too. I remember catching myself one time doing it for my kids thinking, well, nobody's around. How does anybody know that I did this? That I'm such a good father? And that's the deal. That's the deal. That's about integrity, right? You do what you
Yes,
know is
sir.
right, whether anybody's looking or not. So
Yes, sir.
that's that.
Lance, thank you so much for your time today. And can you let the people know where they can find you on social media?
Ion Franchising, ION franchising.com is the website for the free assessment, and social media, you'll find me there as well. I'm on LinkedIn as Lance Graulich, Graulich, and you'll find me.
That's awesome. Thank you for everything, Lance. It's been great.
Thank you, Wesley. It's been awesome.